Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about jQuery. jQuery is actually just a JavaScript library. Um, Actually, if you see what I have here to start with, which is just a super simple example of how to get started with jQuery, you'll notice that there's a script with a remote link to this .js file. If you actually go to your browser and you plug that in, you'll see jQuery. This literally is jQuery. All that JavaScript is jQuery, nothing more. So, first question, where did I get this link to the jQuery library? What I usually do, you could either download it and refer to it locally. I usually, um, unless I unless I'm doing something super important, if I'm doing something that's not really that important, I just do an online reference to it. So, like for example, I'll say Google APIs jQuery, and there's a pretty reliable online source. You can see right here, jQuery. Oops, jQuery has these two links. This is the one you want here. It's the higher version. So actually, you can just copy and paste that right there into your file. We're also going to be doing a little bit of UI stuff, so you probably want to grab the jQuery UI library as well. So you're going to notice that there's some other libraries in here that you might need to grab someday in the future. I rarely ever use anything except the jQuery, jQuery Mobile, and jQuery UI. So these three sets of links here is really all you need, and we're gonna start with just this one. So this is your basic core jQuery script. So what that does is it gives you access to the jQuery operator, which is the $sign. So if you notice here, I have these three elements in this example. I have a paragraph and two divs. And this middle div here has an ID on it, and this div here has a class on it. So instead of going through all the trouble of basically making a separate file and putting my JavaScript in there, I'm just going to write some inline JavaScript here. So script type equals text JavaScript, and then I'll end my script tag there. And I'm just going to write some script right in here. So for example, if I say alert hello, right when I load the page, we should see that hello, and we do. So to get started understanding how to use jQuery, you really need to just think about the name, jQuery. It's really the most powerful aspect of jQuery pretty much is being able to query the DOM and query all the aspects of what's in your markup. So we can start off with, let's try from the bottom up. Let's start with the class. So using the $sign, this is kind of the jQuery operator, and inside of parentheses you put your query. So in this case, I want to say I want to grab everything that has a class of test. So inside the quotation mark I say .test. Again, you remember the dot, just like in CSS, the dot means class, same thing in jQuery. So that's going to get us, in this case, the one div that has the class test. And what can we do with that? Well, you can do a bunch of things with it. You can store it in a variable, and then see if we have it. And we do. And in this case, it's always going to say object. The reason being, when you do this, when you take this query and you wrap it in the $sign turns it into a special object, a jQuery object, that has tons of methods on it that you can invoke. All of the methods in the jQuery library. So jQuery methods, see what we can find here. jQuery API documentation, blah, 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 blah. This is okay. That's not really the one that I wanted to look at. DOM element methods, event methods, it's kind of better. Yeah, W3 Schools has all the good ones. These are much easier to read. This one looks pretty good too. Yeah, this is the one that I always look at. So, there's all these methods, especially, let's do this. jQuery text method. Alright, so api.jquery.com is pretty much the entire jQuery API. And now that I've turned this query into a jQuery object, I can pretty much invoke any method that jQuery objects support. So this is no longer a simple JavaScript variable. That is a jQuery object. So let's try to actually use this one, and text is probably the simplest method. I can say x.text, and I'll say changed, something like that. And now, as you can see, the text is changed. Usually we don't do this declare variable. You can just put that right in line right here. You can say grab anything with the class test and basically cast or turn it into a jQuery object, and then invoke the jQuery text method, which says anything you pass as a parameter, I will use that to change its HTML. And we can see that, again, we can always do this. You can always look in the inspect element and see that the text is actually changed. Obviously, you see it on the screen, you're going to see it in the code behind. So, like I've been saying all the time, anytime you get into one of these libraries, there's so many millions and well, not millions, but there's like hundreds of jQuery methods to get to know. It's not really that important. You get to know all of them. We're just going to start out with some of the most commonly used ones, and I think that's all that's really important. You can learn the other ones as you go and as you need them. So that's kind of my strategy. We're going to just do some of the really common ones. This is, really simple. There's two main types that I'm going to teach you. The first type is, DOM modification. So this obviously is an example of DOM modification. And another one would be where we want to bind an event to it. So that would be something like, we do the same thing. We say, grab that guy that has test on it. And instead of a DOM manipulation, you want to put an event on it. So something like click. So the click takes as one parameter. Just to make this a little more readable, I'm going to put a couple carriage returns here. And I suggest you do this too, because this is going to look a little weird. Actually, I'll leave it the way it looks bad, and then I'll show you why. So the one parameter it takes is a function that gets called when you click on the thing. So it's going to look like this basically whenever you do it. Right? So it looks a little weird because you have an end curly brace and then an end function and then a semicolon. So, the reason it's kind of hard to read is because there's a couple things going on here. You have the end of the click method, right? So if you kind of do that first, you can visualize this is the end of the click method, and this is the beginning of the click method. And the one parameter it takes, if you really space it out, is a function. So if you really want to see things clearly, you can space it out like this. Say something like alert, I got clicked. And we can get rid of this. We don't really need that. So now when I click on that, it's going to say I got clicked. So even though, this is really pretty easy to read here, we can say, oh, the parameter inside of the click method is this function. That's pretty easy to see. But that's not really how people usually write it. They usually kind of do this. Kind of combine the begin of the function and the begin of the click method. And it's just the reason they do it is because I think people just kind of memorize what's going on. And actually, usually people put this brace up here. I hate that though, so I'm going to put the brace right there. Alright, so that's how people usually write it, right there. Well, we can do something a little more interesting than I got clicked. So an important thing to note here is that inside of the scope of this click function, or rather the function that we declared and then passed, because it's a first class function, we pass this function as the parameter into the click method of that jQuery object. We have a scope here, right? You actually are an object at this point, and the object that you are is the div that you clicked on. So you can actually say, this dot text, and then set it something like I got clicked, and that's going to be a lot more interesting because now when we click on that guy, his text is actually going to change. So moral of the story is, you can bind events to jQuery objects as well as modify them directly. So this is binding an event, a click event, and this is modifying the object directly. So these are the types of things that you can do in jQuery, and most of them are pretty easy. This kind of thing is it's like pulling teeth in plain JavaScript, as you probably have experienced just from the previous assignments. So let's talk about some more ways to do selection with the jQuery operator here, the $sign. So let's see. So we selected this time. We did a query for everything with the class of test. Now, if I want to do something by ID, I simply change the dot to a pound. So pound says get me everything where the ID is test. And now I'm talking about that div instead. So I'm going to refresh the page. Click on that guy. See, now he's the one with the event listener, so nothing happens to the other guy. So that's a different type of query. So there's a class selector, there's an ID selector, and now the other way is basically nothing at all. You just say, P. That will select literally every paragraph on the screen. So now, this guy, we're not talking about class, we're not talking about ID, we're just talking about the name of the tag, the name of the element. So hopefully, if I refresh this now, the paragraph is the guy with the event on him. And those are the basic, I think, 99.9% of the time, those are the types of selectors you're going to be using. You can say jQuery selectors, go to W3 Schools. I know you guys read all this. Obviously, look at all this complicated stuff. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that you can do. I hardly ever use any of this, even in really, complex sites. You're not going to have to deal with too much of the hard stuff, and when you do, you just go with it. You figure it out. You come here to the documentation and figure out what kind of a query you need. But they're all based on these top 5 here, right? Select everything, select an ID, select a class, select a couple classes, select an element. So really, it's pretty straightforward. That is the basics of jQuery, is that you're going to be querying the DOM, you're going to be selecting things in the DOM, similar to CSS. Obviously CSS was, I think, kind of inspired jQuery. They said, hey, look at all the awesome selection power that we have in CSS, and we're able to abstract away all of the design and all of the style information. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could do the same thing with the behavior layer? And that's kind of what jQuery allows you to do. Somebody posted an article on the discussion boards earlier saying that you don't want to do too much selection in JavaScript because it's messy. You want to do it in CSS. Well, now we have jQuery. It's not really the case anymore. So jQuery is great for selection and modification and doing all behavior stuff. And there's a ton of stuff in jQuery that we're going to be getting into a little bit at a time. You probably just scraped the surface by looking at the topics in W3 Schools. So we're going to start with this. In the next video, I'm going to help you get set up using Visual Studio, because going forward, this is going to be too big to do in Notepad. So we're going to say goodbye to Notepad and JS Fiddle for a little while and get into a more robust IDE. So pretty much I just wanted to get you started by showing you what jQuery is at its simplest level, and then I'm going to show you some more complicated examples in a minute. So like I said, next video we're going to start off by installing Visual Studio, and I'm going to show you how to create like a really basic empty MVC4 application and get jQuery hooked up to it. Alright.